Hello, everyone. So my name is Shorten, one of the founders of Viscom. Just for context, my background is in industrial design. So I don't know is anyone here an industrial designer by any chance? Oh, okay. We got one person in the back. Okay. We got one person in the back and then possibly one person in the front here. Okay. Awesome. Cool. So I'm going to give a little bit of context because I almost assumed that was going to probably happen. And then go into what we do at Viscom and how we kind of think about the statement and what you're saying here which is, shorten the distance between having an idea and actually bringing it to life. So let's just go right into it. So when it comes to the design, at least the kind of design that we think about, the journey from ideation and actually coming up with an idea usually starts out as just, from a single designer or a team of designers. And these are just some products like, the Samsung Seraph, the Reebok Fury shoes, and just kind of a little bit of the background of the story of what came to how these products were derived essentially. Oh, whoops. So yeah, essentially I was going to ask you guys if you knew who this was. So this is Johan, and this is the guy who invented the paperclip actually. And you don't really think about who made the paperclip, but just to kind of show you guys how a single person with an idea and a drawing is able to then, have a really big impact in the world. So a lot of you guys are probably familiar with designers that design stuff for the digital world, but we're very focused on people and how do we, accelerate workflows for people that design things in the real world, physical products. So that's where we really focus and what I'm going to really get into today. So just to kind of give a brief history, the space that we really started in at one point, people were like this. There was hundreds of designers drafting an idea, a car, a building, maybe even just a shoe. And then CAD came around, 3D modeling, you had CAD modelers, then new job roles actually emerged from technology. So then the next question is, are designers just going to be is a server room? Is this the design studio of the future? Is it just going to be a bunch of GPUs inside of a server room? So I'm going to give a little bit of context of, how AI is actually changing some of these creative tasks and how we kind of are ushering in a lot of these new technologies to do so. And it all starts with a sketch. So with industrial design, drawing is very fundamental to how you communicate your ideas into an actual object. So we very much understand the value of sketching, and someone like myself who just drew a lot prior to this found that it was very fundamental to introduce a technology in a familiar fashion that wasn't too far away from how designers already think and work. So this was really important to me. So this all started out in car design. I used to be a car designer before this at Honda, and then I went to go work at NVIDIA for 3 years as a design researcher. But as a car designer, this was a very perfect use case because cars are very expressive and emotional, and they all start out as drawings. And these drawings later on have to become physical models that later on become the cars we all, not all have, but we all use every other day or so. So here's kind of just like a video of how designers work today. So we started around in 2021, exploring a lot of this. And the first aspect where we found the use case was the actual coloring and shading. So, the very, very old version of Viscom, you would upload a drawing like this, and then just in a few seconds, it would kind of give you those base values to kind of understand what it was that you drew so you wouldn't have to spend a lot of time. And then we came up with this drawing application where as you're drawing, the model is trying to predict what is called the 1, 2, 3 values. These are values that kind of just give drawings and, line drawings, their values, their forms, the depth, so you can actually understand what it is that you want. And we saw this as a way to essentially allow designers to communicate their ideas in a much more higher fidelity while putting in a lot less work. Normally to get something just even like this and understanding where the light's coming from and how to kind of really, render it by hand would just take a lot of time out of designers and kind of taking away from the creativity aspect of their work. So they would really have to focus on the technicality of it rather than the actual design part. So then here's kind of like an updated view of what that looks like. And, we really wanted to focus on keeping the human in the loop here because we found that it's still very important when you're designing products for other people that other people are still involved in making those things. So here's just kind of another look at, how you're able to actually collaborate with our software And in real time, as you're drawing it and describing what it is that you want, the AI is kind of giving you feedback. And another aspect of this is, with 3D models. 3D models is a really fundamental part of a lot of our users' workflows. So you can import, let's say, like a 3D model of a car of some sort that you have to stick to package. You can draw over that. And then as soon as you do that, maybe describe what it is that you drew. And then in a few seconds, you'll just get some rendered variations of what it was that you're trying to communicate. And this is just kind of a new human and AI collaborative workflow for designers where they're no longer hindered by the technicalities that come with their workflow, but rather than the ideas themselves. So I'm just going to go to the next slide here because I'm going to try to give a demo at the end. So here's kind of just a quick graphic that shows the function allocation of where AI and machines fit in the process and then where humans fit currently as how we're seeing it. So as we know, AI is really good at things like speed, precision. It's really good at doing things at scale, really vast. But as humans in the design process, at least for industrial designers, empathy and generalization are still attributes that are still very human, and it's hard for machines to replicate at a point where it's desirable, I would say. So one example of this is with variations. Say you generated this concept jacket using Viscom, and then you can then generate a bunch of different variations of what that jacket potentially could be. And this just allows you to really kind of explore the many, many different ideas from just one idea in a few seconds instead of doing it by hand. And kind of what I was showing earlier to kind of put it into scope here, before it would just take a really long time to communicate what the sketch is trying to be. But now when working with AI, you can see a bunch of different ideas in a really fast amount of time. And then the job becomes more about curating rather than actually creating the things you're curating. Yep. Oh yeah, I already talked about this. Whoops. And then that kind of gets us to this point here where this is just an entirely new workflow. So as humans, we're really good at identifying problems and bringing those problems to the AI, and machines are really good at creating the choices. They maybe don't know which choices are the best, but then that's where we come back in. And this is kind of a new iterative process that we're seeing develop in the creative field that later on derives to new solutions. So this is just a fundamentally new way to kind of tackle creative problems and tasks. So if you were to kind of break it down and kind of understand where in the development of, that paper to production pipeline I was just talking about, the demo will then show right after this, as the product becomes more refined and we start getting in that refined kind of finalization area part of this graph here, that's where the human is very, very important. Because just currently, even state of the art, it's really hard for AI, for example, to make a feature length film or hey, make me a producible car from start to finish. There's still a lot of human touch to that. But in that kind of early inspiration ideation phase is where you're starting to see a lot of value in more of I would say, accelerant workflow versus automation. So we very much try to augment and accelerate designer workflows rather than automate them. So to me, those are two very different things. So yeah, those are kind of some quick slides that I prepared. I'm going to go into a quick demo just to kind of show you guys how Viscom works, what you can do and things. So this is the actual application. I have my Wacom tablet with me. This is just a drawing tablet that a lot of designers or anyone who draws use. So you have your canvas, and then you kind of have this prompt window up here where you can describe something that you want. So let's just see. I'm going to do, how much time do we have here? Okay, we got time. So I'm going to do, let's just say an off-road vehicle design concept, in the sand. Cool. So I imagine most of you guys have probably seen prompting and images getting generated by now and all that kind of stuff. But essentially, what's different here is the actual tools and things. So cool. We got some kind of off-road vehicle design concept in the sand. This is completely generated, but there's certain aspects of this that I maybe don't like. So what I'm going to do is confirm this and then just come over here. This is layers that you would see in something like a Photoshop. And then I'm going to come over here, create a new layer. And then I'm just going to come over here and maybe change some of this. Whoops. Just going to adjust my brush a tiny bit. Okay, cool. All right. So we're going to come over here, and I actually don't want like all this stuff, let's say. And then, whoops, we got some laggage here. Okay, cool. Change this to like, so we can actually like come in here, make some changes that I want to see. Oops. Cool. All right. So, yeah. So say we have something like this, and I actually want the headlamps to be like something like that instead. Whoops. Yeah, we want that because I didn't like all this stuff in the front there. And then let's actually color pick that. Okay, awesome. So now we have kind of like this new change that we want, because I didn't like really like the way the front of the other one looked. And this is just kind of how, you know, one thing that's really important to us is keeping the sense of authorship when you're interacting with AI, because there's a lot of like randomness to this, but I think being able to communicate your sense of authorship when doing this is super important. So I'm going to go into refine mode, because now we're actually refining an image that we got. And this is basically a way that you can choose how much influence you want the render that we just made to influence the generated result. So now we're going to see if we can kind of start narrowing in on this direction that I tried to establish here, slowly kind of refine it. Okay, cool. So you can see it kind of started taking my idea and gave me back something that is more in line with what I was thinking. So now what we can do is confirm this. We can go back inside of the render mode, and then we can start generating more ideas off of the one that I refined to give it. And then I'll show you guys how you can even just modify particular areas. We can even make this like, instead of in the sand, let's say like in the forest. Oh, whoops. Okay, so the reason this is different because the drawing influence was at 0%, you can see here. So, but let's just make this like red. So let's make this maybe like 90% instead. Cool. So we're going to have like a red vehicle, and then we want it in the forest because I didn't really like the sand thing. And then and then I'm going to go into the Q&A right after this. Just give this a few seconds. Okay, cool. So now it's like a red vehicle, kind of in the forest. Oh, do I have sand somewhere in here? Okay, that's fine. It's like off-road in the forest. I can see how I got confused. Like, it's like, I'm trying to say something is off-road in the forest. So you can see how it sometimes literally will try to take what you're saying, but there's a forest in the background. So it tried really hard. So I appreciate that. So what I'm going to do is I kind of want to see more iterations of just what the front is, but I want the machine to do it for me. So I'm going to say I want some like dynamic vehicle concepts. Whoops. Cool. And then change this down and see if it can just, and then now what it's going to do is it's only going to just change that particular area. It's going to have 20% of the original image, but it's going to give me something like very random and new. Cool. Whoa, that's really weird. Okay, cool. I'll try one more. That one's really funky. That's interesting though. It's giving me, like just something new. And it's like, and that's kind of the point of a lot of this. It's to help you derive at ideas you normally wouldn't think of. Sure, these like aren't particularly feasible at first, but that's kind of the point. It's to help you to kind of like think of things you just inherently wouldn't have, because you sometimes just get used into your creative bubble. Like I'd imagine some people have their like Pocket UI or Pocket Sketch they just do all the time. So cool. So yeah, that's kind of like a high level overview of how you can use Viscom, starting from like a prompt, your drawings, and then 10 minutes for Q&A. And yeah, guys, thanks for sitting through my little presentation demo here. Currently, you can't export to CAD. We can only import CAD. Everything is in bitmap right now currently, so these are all just images at the end of the day. But soon we are working on ways of reconstructing these images to be represented as things like mesh and like point cloud-esque type stuff. But yeah, currently just images and bitmap type stuff. We really focus on people that visualize products. I don't know if you guys know like any like render engines or heard of like Keyshot, or some of these things have very particular looks to them. And a lot of these things are just trained on from people using the software over time. And these just happen to be like car designers, footwear, people who design interiors and furniture. So just over time, we just kind of naturally converge towards this thing that favors the visualization of products and making sure that things that, you know, the typical render engines that they're used to using, like Keyshot or Unreal Engine, just kind of naturally comes through because those are the objects and things that they render using our software. So anytime, let's say they export an image, that's basically like a positive of like, hey, like this was like a good quality image that we want to possibly use to help understand what it is that our users want. So yeah, that's kind of like how we go about doing that. Yeah, it's like a mix. It's kind of like a stack of different technologies. Things like, stable diffusion, different other diffusion models in general. But a lot of it is in the like just diffusion. So diffusion is just a technique of generative modeling. Before we were using something called GANs, and that was like just the same kind of concept, but a different technique. But a lot of it is just, diffusion models, you know, figuring out how to take a clip embedding, like a text embedding space, and then figuring out where in that space is the closest image to that description. And it's basically what it tries to do. It's not like, it's like a very dumbed down, like that's like a very simplified, oversimplified possibly way of describing it, but it's not like searching for images is like sometimes the mistaken conception of this stuff is like, oh, is there like a database somewhere and it's like searching it? Yeah, that's really interesting. So inherently, authorship and control is very important from us since the beginning, which is why we kind of derived to a drawing application, because even since you look back at cavemen, they used drawings to tell stories long time ago. So that's like a very fundamental part of like our human nature. So that was kind of how we landed on that. And I think to that, kind of like a counter question to it is, and it kind of goes off of that, is what's not going to change in the future. A lot of people always think of like, oh, like what's going to be like the next big thing, but like what's going to be the next big thing that won't change. And I think there's a lot of things, if you focus on that, you can kind of derive to these really unique interfaces that are extremely human and something that's not so like human, if that makes sense. So it's like kind of like how I think about the problem per se is like more so trying to figure out what are these like first principle kind of fundamentals that won't change in the future about us as people. And then kind of like introducing relative familiar solutions. At least they should feel familiar, because I feel like a lot of designers and artists are pretty stringent on how they work. So we have ideas for the future, but we got to kind of like work our way there. Like the iPad was an idea from like the 80s, but you had to kind of like work there because they were like in the PC world at the time. But yeah, so that's kind of like how I'm like thinking about it. I don't know if I don't know that tangent yet. I don't know, because I feel like if it could identify it, it would fix it. But there's something about the ambiguity that's a good thing, actually. Like, I almost don't think that's like a flaw. Like that last 20% is almost like better to not have solved, because at the very beginning, we tried just presenting our users with photorealistic finished vehicles, but then they complained that like, oh, these already look like things that exist and it's too finished. It's almost like too completed. So almost having that room of error is like an inherent feature in a way. So usually what people do is they export these into their favorite like 3D modeling software like Rhino, SolidWorks, Blender, and they just use it as references to further communicate that to that person, or they'll build it themselves. Yeah, so the demographic is, very much like industrial designers, car designers, for example, like a company like Braun is someone that would use this, New Balance, Ford, people like John Deere, people that design quite literally, even all the chairs you guys sat in or sitting in started out as drawing somewhere, like in a design studio, like IDEO, Frog here in SF. So that's kind of like the general demographic, people that use drawings as a way to communicate physical products. Like I imagine a world where, you upload a sketch of Viscom and then a 3D printer starts firing off somewhere because it's like truly paper to production. They're mainly just text. I think words are a very hard way to fully convey an idea, just only with words. We use mood boards, we use songs even. There's even a world where you can upload a playlist and you get visuals from that. So there's just more to it, I feel like. And that's why we started with drawings, because we realized that drawing is just something that you inherently need to get your ideas across fully, and the text. So those are kind of like this multimodal, multi-input approach. It's just kind of how I think about these problems and where we're really trying to differentiate ourselves, because control and authorship are two very important things for this kind of demographic, is really communicating that design intent fully through the final product. So that's where we really try to hone in and differentiate ourselves. Yeah.